Hello, welcome to this review. It's Logan here, joined by Apps, and this time we are reviewing a game called This Is the Police. Hi Apps, how you doing?
Good, thanks, you.
Yeah, good. Let's get into it then. Get your cards on the table and give us a rundown of the game.
Yeah, so this is a game that I've got no history with. It's a brand new kind of IP or new franchise, if you will, developed by a team I'd not heard of, which is We Appy Studio. Don't know what they had done before, what they'd done, in the past, if anything. But I remember seeing a trailer for this on the internet and thought, that looks quite interesting. And essentially, it's an isometric strategy game, mouse jobby, although it is available on consoles and the Switch as well. But I played it on PC. It looked like a little bit of a twist on the strategy genre. Mr. Paper kindly gave it as a gift for my birthday, so I thought, well, I've got to play it now. And so here we are, a few weeks later, reviewing the damn thing.
Gifting too, isn't he?
Well, it was on my wish list, so that's my fault for leaving it on there.
Yeah. Okay, so what's the game about then? What's the story? I remember it rings a bell in my head, but I can't remember exactly what it is, so it'd be good to hear.
Yeah, so you're a police chief, and you're in charge of the police within a city called Freeburg. Your name's Jack Boyd, sort of an older, much more a veteran of the policing world. Been doing the job for years, it seems. He's pretty run down. Like he's pretty. Looks like he's had a few tough wars in his life, and he's kind of winding down his career. But before Jack's ready to go, the mayor comes along and says, "Right, 6 months and you're out of here." So what that breaks down to is that you've got 180 days before Jack's retirement, and Jack has worked out that in order for him to have a decent retirement plan, he needs to make 500,000 because the pension that he's going to get isn't going to be that good, and he's probably squandered his money elsewhere. So you can generate money during your performance and via the usual kind of police salary or performing well, or you might decide to take a few backhanders from the mafia. You might turn a blind eye to the odd crime committed by them, and there's loads of other scenarios that are kind of built into the game and force you to make a couple of choices during your journey to figure out what sort of police chief you're going to be. Are you going to take Jack down the road of taking backhanders, of facilitating some of the underworld activity, or are you going to try and keep it on the straight and narrow? And there's twists and turns in Jack's stories along the way, but it's essentially the days leading up to his retirement, and you're essentially tasked with get as much money as you can. How you choose to do that is up to you.
Well, that is more rich backstory than I ever anticipated, really. I don't know why. I had something really simplistic in mind.
No, that's the thing that kind of surprised me, is how narrative focused it is. Now, the day-to-day tasks, obviously, they take up the main bulk of the gameplay, but it's some very long, graphic novel type story piecing. That's how they're kind of done. They're voiced, which really adds a bit of personality to each of the characters you talk to. But there's a genuine arc and story here, which you don't typically find in too many strategy games. Usually just trying to get through each scenario and each level and whatnot. But this is without the narrative, it certainly would make it a far less interesting game.
Yeah, I must admit, for some reason I didn't expect that. So what does it look like? For some reason in my head I've got this 8-bit top-down sort of thing in my head. I don't know why, but what actually does it look like? Yeah,
it's not quite 8-bit. It's isometric view, but it's solid, objects. But it's literally you're staring at a top-down view or an isometric view of the city, which has got skyscrapers, it's got residential areas, it's got commercial areas, things like that, and there are roads for people to get around in, and it really is basic. Coloured boxes will come up and say there's a crime in this area. You'll then send out a car, for example, and you'll see the kind of line, the coloured line as it travels out, and that takes time and it comes back. And yeah, it's a really basic looking game, but for what it is, it services it quite well. And as I said, the graphic the graphic novel voice scenes are very, again basic, but they add a bit of a charm to it. It's got this nice kind of old feeling to it, but it's not 8-bit. It looks a lot nicer and a lot more cleaner than that.
Right. So does it feel a little bit old school in how it looks, or does it feel like if it was old school and you'd tidied it up a bit?
I don't necessarily think it looks old school. It's just very simplistic, I guess. Like they don't. The models that are there for the skyscrapers, for example, aren't fully formed, fully modelled. They are just essentially like grey shapes sticking out the ground. I'm probably making this sound worse than it is. When you see it, you'll know that it doesn't look anywhere near as bad as this. But it's not it's not like something like a Total War where you can zoom right in on the fights that are taking place. It's you're in this isometric view. All you're doing is managing the crimes around the city, and the graphic novels kind of give it a little bit of a change up.
Oh, fair enough. It sounds interesting. It's intrigued me. So, how does the game actually progress then? I presume you sort of just go through mission after mission, certain events present themselves and whatnot, and you earn the money that way.
Yeah. So each day, you take over the police force. So a day lasts, I don't know how long even now, probably 5 to 8 minutes, maybe a little bit longer. And there's a timer, so you start at like 8 in the morning and then you finish at like 6 in the evening. Sometimes the day will finish at 10 in the evening, things like that. But you take control of the police force each day, and obviously, as in any city, crimes are committed in various areas of the city. And essentially what the crux of it is, you decide which officers to send. So you've got a roster of police officers that you have to manage. You can choose how many to send at any one time. And you have to kind of take into consideration how far away is the crime, how many officers does it sound like it needs, and you get like a little, an overview from the operator. And then you make a decision. You say, okay, out of my 8 officers for the day, I'm going to send 2 to this particular incident. Hoping it's not a prank call. They do happen as well. And then it's a balance, throughout the day of managing the different hotspots in crime, making sure you've got enough officers back at the base to deal with anything, whilst also making sure the crimes that have been committed, you send out enough officers to deal with it, because the consequences for sending or leaving a particular incident short can be dire. Like a citizen could end up getting killed, a police officer could end up getting killed, or the criminal could simply get away. So it's really interesting to read each of the different transcripts that come in that are about not a paragraph long, a couple of sentences, and saying, okay, that sounds pretty terrible. I'm going to send 4 officers instead of 2. And really, you're trying to get as many criminals locked up as you can. And by doing so, you can request things like an increase in staff. You can upgrade your SWAT team, which again you can choose to send to certain crimes. So if something sounds particularly violent, you might want to send the SWAT team as a backup. Very annoying when it turns out to be a prank call, because the SWAT team can usually only be called out 1 or 2 times a day. Or you can, you could request a new detective. So as well as the day-to-day instances that go on, there are sometimes crimes where the perpetrator has fled. So in that case, you send a detective along, and they work long-term to try and figure out what's happened and arrest someone. So over a couple of days, they might come back with clues, and then your task basically is a little puzzle to put the clues in the right order based on the different witness statements that are there. But obviously, the crux of all this is that you want to end up earning as much money as you can, because you've got that 500k, you've got 180 days, you want to get to 500,000, and that's a real kind of driving factor. And how you do that, as I said, can manifest itself in different ways. Each of your kind of police officers in your team has a competency or a professionalism level. So, if you send an underskilled officer to a potentially dangerous crime scene, like I mentioned, that could yield some terrible results, such as a death of the officer, a death of a citizen, the perpetrator getting away. And there's all these kind of things you've got to think about for each of your crimes. Officers with low professionalism or low competency are far less reliable. They call in sick more often. They can come in drunk. So if someone comes in pissed up, you kind of have to make a decision there. Do I put them on the job for that day, bearing in mind that they might still be pissed up and could crash the car? There's things like that do happen during the game. So you really do get a different load of different scenarios that pop up during the days and during the coming months. And it's it's interesting trying to keep on top of it. One last sort of feature I mentioned is you've got two shifts. You've got shift A and shift B. They rotate each day. So shift A goes on, then shift B, then shift A. One thing you can do is if you feel like you're going to be particularly short for a day, you could ask someone to work the following day, which in turn means they're going to be working 3 days in the bounce. And there's sort of like an energy level to manage there. So older officers will get tired more quickly. If they come in tired, again, not going to be as effective, could cause problems later on down the line.
It's very involved. It's much more involved than I thought it'd be. There's more detail input for some reason than I ever imagined. So yeah, that's good to hear.
It's never easy either, because you get a request from the mayor's office that might say, I don't know, something like within the next 3 days you need to sack all the staff who are over a certain age. So at that point you have a decision to make. Do you want to fulfil this request and perhaps earn, a little bonus from the mayor's office, keeping in mind, 500k, or are your older officers actually your most skilled officers, and therefore do you want to kind of reject that proposal, take a hit with the reputation with the mayor's office, which means you might not get your increase in staff forces. If you reject too many of these, sometimes your force is cut, so you're forced to let people go. So there's all these different things that the game's always doing to try and make things more interesting. One scenario in particular which I really liked was a rich fella come and approached me and said, I'd like to fund you to have 3 or 4 extra police officers. And I thought, Christ, that's good. You can have an extra 2 officers per shift. That's going to help me out massively. But the kind of catch was that one of the officers had to be his nephew, and you couldn't fire him under any circumstances. So I was like, right, what's he going to be like when he gets there? When he arrives, he's got a competency level of 10. Now, the average is 200. So he's a fucking liability, but it's kind of like a mini project for me, because I've kind of wanted to, as they solve more crimes and get better, they move up in rankings, and eventually I had him for ages, and he eventually became one of my sort of long serving and better officers, and he come right from the bottom of the barrel.
That's really quite interesting. I was going to say, is there like character development of the people, and obviously there is. So yeah. Again, it's quite involved, more involved than I thought it would be. So, yeah. So how does the actual game control then? I'm going to presume it's mainly point and click.
Yeah, mouse controlled strategy game. Don't know how it works on any other platforms. It sounds like it'd be pretty difficult, but with a mouse you can scoot around, click on things, hit yes, hit no, move things around, drag and drop. You've got all those bits and pieces. Nothing else really to report on other than the controls are there. They are what they are, and they work well on PC.
And that's it. They do what they need to.
Yeah.
So I think one of the interesting things that's going to make this review probably more interesting, based on the fact that it was a gift from Mr. Paper, is the value for money of it. So how much is it in the store at the moment? Do we know, or at the time Paper got it, did he cheap out?
Yeah, no, it wasn't. It was on sale, obviously. Yeah. Otherwise, that wouldn't have been bought, would it? But it's currently on the store for £14, okay. Which I think is quite good value. I want you to take a guess at how long you think the game took me to complete the story mode or the campaign. Based on it's a £14 game, clicking, point and click sort of strategy game. How long do you think the game is roughly?
Well, based on what you've told me so far, I think probably I'm going to say around 20 hours.
It's not far off. It was 17 hours.
Yeah.
Which, in theory, sounds great when you look at the value for money. But it's
£1 an hour is normally good value. So
it's too long. That is too long.
It's too much for the boy.
What I've described to you sounds interesting, and it is, but
rinse and
17 hours and nothing changes. It's a problem, I think, in this particular game, because if you get satisfaction from completing something, then you've got to have to play a lot of this game to get through it, and I did. And it doesn't, like I said, the scenarios obviously change, but the day to day, I don't know if this is part of their approach was to make it monotonous, so you kind of get a feeling for what it's like. But I don't want to be playing that in a video game that long. For £14,
monotony is never the good trait that you want to put in the game.
No, for £14, it's great value, but far too long for what it's trying to do. I would have preferred if they shortened the campaign by quite a few hours, and then spent more time making the sandbox mode that you unlock afterwards more interesting. That's because it's more of a challenge mode. Basically, just chuck shit at you, and you've got to try and last as long as you can. I'd have actually liked a mode where it's like, you don't have to make money, doing underhand things if you don't want to, or if you want to, but just try and keep on top of the city in a normal state and see how long you last. But it feels like the sandbox mode is just a really difficult mode they've added. So value-wise, depends how you look at it. If you look for £1 an hour, you're getting more than that, so you're getting great value, but it is the same thing over and over.
Rinse and repeat's never usually a good thing, is it? I mean, we've kind of leaked into AOB, but is there anything else that that comes to mind that we haven't covered?
No, not really. I mean, I think I mentioned that the voice acting in those kind of story scenes are quite well done, considering they're simplistic. So definitely a thumbs up for that. But yeah, any other business is too long for my liking. Could have been a much leaner game, and didn't need as many days as it did to go through.
So this is sort of the last final piece of this. It makes it quite interesting, actually, because I can normally see where these are going. I mean, but it's good. It's a good point to mention, really, on these reviews that we do. We don't really talk much about the game or anything beforehand. We usually just sort of kind of jump into it, really. So I don't really know where you're at most of the time with these games. And I must admit, I really don't know where you sit with this one. So, I mean, I get the feeling like you there are aspects of it that you really like, but after a little while, it kind of just run a bit thin with you. But how do you feel about the game in general?
It's an interesting spin on the strategy genre for sure. Not quite played anything like it. Definitely the idea of it's good. Like those early hours of playing through it are fantastic, because you've not really played anything like that before. So I certainly haven't. But as time wears on, as you become more comfortable with the mechanics and the scenarios that come in, you think, fuck off, you're just trying to stick a cock up my arse now and I don't want it. It does wear far too thin for a story campaign, and I felt like they could have put more effort into a sandbox or an infinite mode perhaps in that aspect. But it's definitely an interesting game, just is flawed in some aspects.
So how long do you think you gave it before you went, right, how much longer of this then?
The first time I switched it on, I think I played it for about 4 or 5 hours straight. Didn't feel bothered at all. Second session, similar sort of level of commitment put in. At the end of that session, I was like, I'm not even halfway through this yet if I look at the days. I thought, good Jesus. I thought I'd break its back in this second session. And it weren't getting close, and then it was getting more difficult, and some of the decisions I'd made earlier on just put me in a real difficult hole, which was fine. I was happy with that because I'd fucked about, basically made a fuck up, but just being at that point of 10 hours and thinking this isn't going to change for potentially the next 10 hours, it's probably that it could have been cut at least another 5 off it, and I think then it would have been a better length for me.
So we find ourselves in a position where we're saying a game is too long, which is unusual. But should you buy it or bin it, though?
Fucking buy it.
Oh, I genuinely didn't know where you were going to go. I thought if those last few hours have really hurt you, like they did on, what's his name? Xbox, Lord of the Shadow of Mordor, Shadow of War. But
that one, the thing about that was it purposely upped the grind level in hope. In my view, this is my view. Purposely upped the grind in hope that you would purchase loot boxes. And it's the annoying thing about that game in particular. I know I'm not talking about it, but they're releasing a patch in July to remove all the loot boxes from it and restructure that last part of the game. So obviously,
basically backs you up there, doesn't it? Yeah, basically.
If the devs are doing it, then They obviously are looking at that thinking, right, I reckon they have all the data. They can see when people have stopped it, and I imagine after doing like 2 of the fortresses that I did, they thought, "Fuck this."
Yeah.
Especially when you realise you've got another 18 to go. So I mean, this one in particular, it was designed to be this long.
Yeah.
And it's not trying to, coax any extra money out of me. It's not introducing extra days or anything like that. It doesn't go, oh, actually, you've now got another 3 months. So it's not moving the goalposts. But the time it takes just to get through it is long. But, some people will enjoy it. Might perhaps play it in smaller chunks and play it over a longer period of time. You'll feel less, perhaps, worn out on it.
So to sum it up, sometimes less is more.
Sometimes less is more. Or sometimes just playing it less is more. It's the player's choice. You can sting yourself out of anything if you play it too long. So perhaps that was my problem with it. But I feel like the good games, even if you play a lot of it in a short space of time, you'll still think it was the right length. And this one didn't have enough guts behind it.
Fair enough. So moving on to the key bit that everyone's been waiting to hear. Then, what is its official grading?
This is the police official grading bronze.
It's probably fair. I think that's probably fair. Bronze isn't a sad rating.
I always just say it's worth playing if you're interested in the genre, and it's not perfect, but we know most games aren't perfect, so
no games
are. And if you're interested in having a bit of a spin on the strategy genre, then this is a great game to pick up. Just don't expect to finish it before you're 36.
So there you are,
an older age.
So there you are, a game where less sometimes is more. That's been a good review. Good to have it in the books. Thanks for your time, Apps. Ta-da.
180 days of quiet, Jack. That's all I need. I don't have any problems with you, and you won't have any problems with me.
I'll do my best. I may have a lot of vices, but predictability isn't one of them.